Well, today we are really blessed to have one of the all-time best-selling authors with us. Jerry Jenkins is with us today, and we're going to talk about his new book, I, Saul, which is a fascinating novel. But I'm sure you perhaps have picked up one of his books in the past, and of course he's the gentleman behind the Left Behind series. And a lot of his books are #1 bestsellers, and he's been recognized around the world. Over 70 million copies of his books have been sold. So what an honor to have him. Jerry, what a delight, my friend. Did you write all those books behind you?
I haven't even read all the ones behind me, but my kids tease me that I've written more books than I've ever read already, Perry. But it's great to be with you. Thanks.
Oh, what a delight. And are we Skyping you in from Colorado? Is that home for you still?
Yeah, Colorado Springs.
Oh, great. Good. Nice to have you. Well, listen, this new book, I, Saul, is just fascinating. What inspired you to go down this road?
Well, I had done the Jesus Chronicles, which were novels based on the Gospels. And it just seemed like the next person, in the sequence, which should be Paul. He's a fascinating character. And, of course, it's tricky to do a biblical character because you don't want to violate Scripture. But there's so much that's just sort of hinted at about Paul. As much as is written about him, there's still things that are just hinted at. For instance, there's a verse or two that talk about Paul's sister's son overhears a plot to have him killed and informs the authorities, and that plot is thwarted. Well, that's just 2 or 3 verses in the New Testament, but to a novelist, that's 2 or 3 chapters. So you want to give that kid a name and determine why he would have still been sympathetic to his uncle after his uncle had been converted and turned his back on his faith and had become part of the enemy. Those kind of things are fun to flesh out. So it's a great character to play with.
Well, I might add, this is a novel, folks, and I think you'll find it to be a fascinating read. Dr. James MacDonald, what inspired? Tell us about him and how he plays into your writing of this book.
Well, James is an old friend, and he's a pastor of a megachurch in Chicago. There's about 13,000 people that hear him every weekend and on 7 campuses there. And
wow.
I've never been accused of being a theologian or a scholar, so I always need somebody to keep me on track theologically. And I've heard him preach on Paul and on Peter, and he's quite a student and quite a scholar. So I asked him if I could pick his brain and if I could have access to his sermon notes and things like that. So he was thrilled to do that, and so I got some time with him, and then had access to all those resources, and it was really invaluable to the research. So it really helped. When I was doing my writing, I would send him pages and say, does this make sense theologically? And besides keeping me on track that way, he was a great cheerleader. He would say, send me more. I want to find out what happens myself.
So was he pleased theologically with your end result?
He was. I don't think he's worried about his place in the pulpit, but he was happy with what I did.
Oh, good. Let me skip ahead and come back. Are you going to take on other Bible characters, other apostles, as a result of this?
Well, I might. There definitely is going to be a sequel called I, Paul, because there's still more stuff about his missionary journeys, and I really want to investigate, too. A lot of people don't realize, they've heard this, but I think they forget it. Between the time of the great conversion experience on the Damascus Road, I think people just sort of skip ahead to Paul's ministry and all the great things that happened on his missionary journeys. He was snake bit, he was shipwrecked, he was stoned almost to the point of death. But I think they forget that there was a 3-year, term of exile where the Lord basically took him to Arabia, and I think taught him all these things that he wrote in the epistles. People just have him going into ministry, but he talks about 3 years where God just spoke to him and even transported him into heaven at one point. I think that deserves some time, and so there'll be I, Saul, that I have to finish for next year. So then maybe Peter after that. It'll be fun.
Well, he certainly is responsible for most of the writing in the Bible, and in some ways, do you see yourself in this? You do a lot of writing.
Well, that was an intimidating part. People often say, what do you learn when you write a novel? And one thing that surprised me was I didn't realize how humbling it would be. When you take on a character who is a writer, it's a great mirror to you. When you've written as much as I have and have had as much success as I have, you can start feeling pretty good about yourself until you deal with a character who's writing has held up for 2 millennia. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would come to the keyboard every day feeling pretty low and say, you know, if my writing lasts maybe 20 years after I'm gone, I'll feel pretty good. But 2,000 years, Paul's writings have held up. So I began to realize that I was really the junior partner in this relationship.
Well, but fascinating, as you take a biblical character such as Saul, Paul, and you begin to write on it, it probably has some kind of a spiritual impact on you as well.
It really did, and you know, I try to tell beginning writers, you know, I own the Christian Writers Guild, so I teach writers too, and I say a character needs a character arc. The character should be much different from page 1 than he is on page 400, and that has to happen to the writer too, or it won't happen to the reader. And I definitely grew. I grew spiritually in this, and I grew in my knowledge, and doing the research and picking James MacDonald's brain was really helpful to me. I felt like I kind of sat in a seminary class during that whole time. And one of the uniquenesses of this book is that it's not just a historical biblical novel. My editor challenged me. She said, if you want to see this book cross over to the general market the way the Left Behind books did, you need to add a contemporary element. And I had already begun, and I was writing the historical biblical, you know, angle on this. And she said, you know, this needs to be like the Da Vinci Code meets the Robe. Keep that first century thing in there, but give us like modern day story too. So every other chapter, I'm in present day, 21st century. I've got a seminary prof that's got a guide, Holy Land guide friend who discovers the memoir of Paul. You can imagine the priceless, you know, thing about this, that that bad people would want to have access to it and make millions or even billions on it. And so lives are at stake, and there's this, you know, caper that's going on. And then every other chapter, we're back in the first century with Paul having been condemned to death, Luke visiting him, trying to keep him alive so that he can face his execution, get to preach one last time. So readers are really getting 2 novels in one. I
love that parallel storytelling. It's fascinating, and I would agree. I would say that's probably going to draw a lot of people to the book that otherwise wouldn't read it and see it maybe as too spiritual, religious. But you know, and the other thing is, Jerry, you're dealing with political intrigue. You're dealing with the culture. You got a mystery woven into this thing. Did you sense any parallels then and now?
Yeah, there really are. I mean, I think the biggest thing is I've got my modern day character, and his name is Augustine Knox. So his students kind of tease him that, you know, what other profession could he have but being a seminary prof? He couldn't be a cab driver with a name like that. So, but he's really worried about his friend, because his friend has discovered these memoirs, and as I say, nefarious interests involved in this. So his life is at stake. Those are really loyal friendships, and they're, you know, these guys are protecting each other, and then you go back 2,000 years, and that's the case with Luke and Paul. I mean, here Paul's got his best friend for decades who's traveled with him and suffered all kinds of hardships and faced, you know, life and death situations, and he's asking this physician friend, keep me alive so that I can die. What a terrible burden to put on a friend. But he's saying, you know, in this dungeon, I can't preach. Nobody can hear me. I'm in this, you know, windowless chamber that's stifling by day and freezing at night, and you know, I can call out, but nobody can hear me but a few prisoners who are delirious anyway. But he's saying, as a full Roman citizen, they can't chop my head off inside the city wall, so they're going to have to parade me outside. They want to anyway, because they're going to say, we've got the head of this sect that's against the Roman government. We're going to, you know, make a spectacle of him. But he says, that gives me one last chance to preach, so make sure that I don't die before that opportunity. So those parallels of those loyal friendships, I think, are interesting. Absolutely fascinating. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Jerry Jenkins, and here's his new book, I, Saul. It's a novel, picture of it there on the screen, and check it out, put out by Worthy Publishing. Check it out at the Christian bookstores or online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Well, we're back with a very special guest today. Jerry Jenkins is with us today, and good chance you read one of his books during the Left Behind series and others, and one of the most popular authors of our day with over 70 million books sold. And I now hold in my hand his latest, a novel called I, Saul.
And there's a picture of it there on the screen. Let me have you check it out. It's put out by Worthy Publishing, and you may want to check it out at Evangel or Jacksonville Discount Books or Amazon, online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Jerry, and again, you're paralleling modern times and first century. It's kind of interesting. So how difficult was it to write Texas and Rome at the same time? Okay, do we have a little bit of a Skype issue there? All right, we'll get him straightened out here again. All right, hold on here, folks. Sorry about that. That's what happens with Skype, but we'll get him back here in just a second. Let me again just show you this. It's a fascinating, what's this latest in the series? Well, actually the first in the series. This one's called I, Saul. And as we know, Paul, the Apostle Paul, was called Saul. And then following up on this, he plans to write the sequel to it called I, Paul. And Jerry Jenkins, fascinating writer, as he's had over 70 million copies sold, including the phenomenal mega best-selling series Left Behind, which he wrote with Dr. Tim LaHaye. 20 of his books have reached the New York Times bestsellers list, including 7 that debuted at #1. They just debuted at #1. As well as USA Today, Publishers Weekly, Wall Street Journal best-selling list. He's just been on all of them, and this latest one now is called, of course, I, Saul, which is a parallel of interesting because the book does talk about a professor in Texas by the name of Dr. Augie Knox, and then it parallels it to I, Paul, or St. Paul, a little bit later on in the book where he talks about Saul before he becomes Paul and all the things that he did with and are dealt with, and so it's pretty fascinating. Hopefully we'll get him back here in just a moment and we'll continue on, but let me just say that it is put out by Worthy Publishing. So I would check with the folks at Evangel there in the mall or Christian Discount Books out in Jacksonville and get a copy of it. It's really great. And then or online at let's see here, at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. All right, we're going to see if we can get him back, so let us take a quick break, and we'll check in with Jerry and see if we can get him back just for a few more comments. Sorry about that. Sometimes that happens with Skype, and we'll see if we can reconnect with him in his office there in Colorado. We'll be right back. Okay, we're trying to reconnect with Jerry Jenkins, and sorry about that. Apparently we have got a little bit of a dropout in the Skype, and they're working on that. Hopefully we'll connect with him here on the phone just for a few moments to kind of wrap things up. But it's a fascinating book, and it's the latest in series that he is now starting. It's called I, Saul. It's a novel. Jerry Jenkins, perhaps one of the, well, he is one of the most outstanding authors of our day. I understand we do have him back on the phone. Jerry, you're with us?
Sure.
You there, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I am so sorry for that. When the picture froze, I will say your mouth was closed, so you were okay. Thanks for giving us a few more moments here. Jerry, I asked you the question before we lost you there on Skype that writing about the parallel of times, Rome and Texas, kind of help us with that.
Yeah, that was the challenge. I mean, my technique in writing is that each day I start by editing and rewriting what I've written the day before, and in this case, that usually that catapults me into the next day's writing. But in this case, I edit and rewrite what I've written the day before in its first century, and then I have to switch gears completely, and I'm writing about present day. Wow. So it's kind of jarring. I had to leave sandals and dust and bowls of gruel and being in a dungeon, and now I've got cell phones and computers and cars and that type of thing. But that's fun, and it's really a different experience. And besides getting to be all these different people, I have to jump ahead and back 2,000 years at a time. But never a dull moment. I keep thinking that the older I get, the faster writer I should be. But that kind of slowed me down and made me a much pickier writer too. The bar gets set higher. You want to make each chapter better than the last. So it was a challenge.
Well, I look forward to diving into the book starting tonight. I promise you. I've already started reading a little bit, and I'm fascinated. Let me ask you this. What do you think the hallmark to your success in writing is? And I know that's a tough question to ask somebody who's involved in it, but you've been very successful, and what do you think it is?
Well, I do try to think reader first. I think a lot of writers are thinking, try to make a name for yourself, or try to impress a publisher, or worry about certain markets and this and that. And I try to write things that I would like to read, and hope that there's a lot of people like me out there. And then, just as a writer, I'm constantly trying to learn to say things as tightly and succinctly as possible. Mm-hmm. And so it's omitting needless words, getting to the point, and I want people I want to get out of the way of the story. I want people to really feel like they're drawn in and immersed in the story.
Let me just switch back to, just for a moment, the Left Behind series. Incredible success. What do you think that was? I mean, are people just fascinated with end times, or I don't know. You guys sold a ton of books.
Yeah, I think partly people are interested in the end times, but basically, we're living in a time of fear, and I think people are looking for something beyond themselves. They see all these huge international things happening. They see an increase in natural disasters and events like that. And they see, anything spiritual. You see books by the Dalai Lama and the Pope and the Eastern healing gurus and that type of thing. All these are popular. They hear about fiction based on, the prophecy about the end times based on the Bible, and I think it hit that same thirst and hunger. And then I think because, admittedly, it's an interpretation and it's fiction. It's our idea based on what it could look like. But I think because it was based on truth, it resonated with people, and they saw themselves in it. And because the rapture happened in the first chapter of the first book, there wasn't a lot of religious lingo. It was people that were left behind, desperately searching to find out what happened, and that's why it crossed over.
Well, there's something about your writing that's very unique, and I don't know if it's intentional. If it is, I pick up on it. If it's not, then it's still a wonderful virtue, and that is, at the end of the day, all of your writings create a curiosity about Christ and the gospel, and I commend you for that.
Well, that is the bottom line. I mean, I do feel like, people say, what's the point? I do feel called, down deep to bring glory to Christ. That's the issue. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to make it like everything's a sermon and everything is, overt, but that's really why I'm doing this. If I was just doing it to write, I'd probably just only be a sports writer. I mean, I love sports, and that's how I started. But right. I felt called to full-time Christian work, and this just happens to be the medium.
Well, 70 million books. Why don't you just go fishing? What inspires you to keep going?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I never did this just to put bread on the table. I mean, I felt called to it. And not to sound falsely modest, but I really feel I've only been given the one gift. I don't sing or dance or preach. This is what I do, and so I feel obligated to exercise that one gift. And as long as I can do it, I think I ought to be doing it.
Well, I commend you. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I value it greatly. I know you're a busy guy, and sorry for our little technical problem there, but look forward to the sequel to this. But right now, it's called I, Saul. It's a novel put out by Worthy Publishing. Jerry Jenkins, you got to get a copy of this and check it out. And are you already into I, Paul, Jerry?
I am. I'm sorry that my face stopped your camera, but I'm working on I, Paul.
Well, your mouth was closed, so you're okay.
Okay.
Thanks, my friend. I look forward to having you back soon. Blessings on you, and keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, see you, Jerry. Jerry Jenkins with us today. Again, check it out. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and can't wait for the other one to come out as well. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.